Hello, good afternoon. I would like to have a brief introduction to myself. My name is Dr. Simon Chiu, and actually I come from Hong Kong originally. So actually, it's one of the presenters. I would just have an opportunity to communicate with him and actually compliment him about putting the slide in Japanese and Chinese. So I just want to put a kind of global perspective. I've been around North America for quite some time, and I did my graduate training in neuroscience as well as medicine. So I think that I have been around research neurobiology for quite a number of years. But I want to make this as informal as possible, so that audience can participate quite freely into these important areas. I have to apologize first of all that if the slides seem to be over informative, then maybe that can produce a counter effect. But you can have all the slides available. If you can just send me your email, and maybe it's after the end of this talk, you can give me your email, and I will send you all my slides to you. I want to mention this. I've been involved in drug discovery program. Pharmacology is my forte. So even though my academic affiliation is with the Department of Psychiatry, actually psychiatry may be better reframed in terms of behavior neuroscience. I think that is a better way to look at it. And I want to mention about first of all, thank you, Dr. Fisher, for introducing me as part of this workshop this afternoon. I hope you're all enthusiastic after the lunch, and also to talk about the epigenetic diet. I thought that maybe this should come before lunch. Yeah. So I just want, before I start, I just want to mention, even though I'm the one standing in front of the podium, that this talk is by no means my own work. I have been working, fortunately, with a group of investigators coming from diverse areas, and actually in China and South Africa and also in Canada. So I want to express it, acknowledge them, and also some of the graduate students, Kristen and Hannah. So I think that they put a lot of work in my research program for the past decade. Okay. The topic it is a bit different because it is a new areas of epigenetic-based diet interventions, and combines technologies, brain games, and also physical exercise and cognitive aging. I just want to say something in exercise. You may wonder why I have the psychiatry to the images and sit in an armchair, talk to the patient, hang up. Actually, my part of my CV is that I spent my master training in kinesiology, so there is another action. So actually, I come from a very complicated background. So I want to mention that even though I participate in research, I did not receive any honorarium from any of the pharmaceutical companies. So I think that my research has been funded by various non-profit organizations, including Michael J. Fox and also Stanley Medical Research Institute. Okay, I just want to the pointer. Okay. I just want to mention about this the PET imaging, but become familiar to all of you. So I want to mention about I started my career doing the radioligand binding assays in animals. So from there on, it was like that you see some of the imaging actually borrowed from radioligand binding assay. So there is a typical presentation of the fluorine deoxyglucose measuring the energy cerebral metabolism. And just notice that there's a difference in terms of in the late stage of Alzheimer's. It seems that there's a decrease in the utilization of energy at the level of the glucose. And I want to mention that recently there has been a move towards a standardization of the diagnostic criteria of Alzheimer's in terms of the use of the PEP, which is one of the early versions to measure the amyloid. However, later, as you may recognize, that the amyloid is by no means a powerful mnemonic, because there have been studies showing that as early as 10 or 15 years, the amyloid deposit actually considered have been localized in the various regions on the brain. And there's diagnostic categories recently due to the revised NIA, that we call it MCI's mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's dementia. And so earlier there is also the metabolic biomarker that converts a high genetic risk in terms of the ApoE. Why is it that I mentioned this imaging? I'm by no means a neuroradiologist, but I mentioned that it offers therapeutic opportunities that span over 1 or 2 decades when we can move in there to devise whatever the interventions, whether it may be psychological, the behavioral, pharmacological, as well as physical intervention to delay the onset or even to reverse the Alzheimer's, so that they can translate into the patient quality of life. As a clinician, I have the opportunities of assessing as well as taking the late-stage Alzheimer's patients. So actually, it is gratifying to see some of the advances. So at least as some of the patients, family, they offer us some sense of hope. I want to mention about that. I want to put this into the proper perspective about what people will say is nutritional epigenomics. Okay, there seems to be a very big word to throw around to impress the lay audience, but actually it is a very ground-to-earth interventions. It is to look at what we are familiar with, if you go to come from the behavioral, psychological background, we talk about psychosocial stressors. For the last couple of decades, neuroscientists have been able to translate the psychosocial stressor into concrete, measurable frame of reference, and they can be as concrete and discrete as metabolic stress, defined in terms of the metabolic syndrome, whether it may be changing the blood pressure, the insulin resistance, and ER endoplasmic reticulum, which is a protein synthesis that alters the conformation of the protein. Actually is one of the current hypotheses underlying the amyloid. It is not so much about the burden of the amyloid, but also the protein conformation, whether it's in an aggregated misfolded form, and it's all generated by the endoplasmic reticulum. I want to say that the era has passed when we're just looking at the oxidative stress relieved by the phytochemicals. Because if oxidation stress is a cardinal sign of Alzheimer's, we should expect some of the millions tried on ginkgo now would have been in the clinical practice. Unfortunately, that is not the case, because some of those phytosteroids, they have both the pro-oxidant as well as the antioxidant effect. So actually, it's the whole idea of, in physiology, we call it homeostasis. So on the other side, that even though this is an Alzheimer's dementia, that in aging, we also have to look at what our colleagues have been working quite hard for the past couple of decades to look at the cardiovascular risk factor, metabolic risk factor, and last but not the least, it is the cancer. It has an increased prevalence in the aging population, as well as obesity, the epidemic. So what is the nutritional epigenetic? Without going into the molecular targets, is quite simple. It is the way to which DNA methylation is occurred, so that it is a way to modify the genes, but it does not modify the DNA sequence. Then the second target, the second component, beside the histone, is that how the DNA or non-coding DNA regulates or fine-tune the gene expression. Okay, so all these all these slides I have to acknowledge that those are from some of them are from the public domain. And there is another way to look at how the vicious cycle. So when you look at the preventive agenda for Alzheimer's, we also have to look at this vicious cycle, that is how this dye come into the picture. From the metabolic the dye, we are sent it to the brain. We look at the localized to the hippocampus, and they affect the memory, and in turn, it creates a kind of vicious cycle. So that could explain partially why diabetes, obesity are considered to be a high-risk factor. However, that recently there have been quite an intriguing, controversial paper which showed that at the extreme ends of the BMI, where the BMI less than 18, BMI greater than 35, they are at equal risk to convert the Alzheimer's dementia. So that there is a longitudinal study. They followed those patients from midnight to the elderly population. So in other words, the view has come full circle. We do not have the final answer yet, but maybe we have a metabolic threshold. When you cross the threshold, then you are in the realm of early the Alzheimer's or MCI. So without much ado, I'm not a nutritionist. Again, I want to preface that, but I have the opportunity of working with a dietitian to know some of the Mediterranean diets and also the Dutch diet, and also in the Western world, people looking at all kinds of diets, and also when you across Asia, that actually one of the solid findings is that I'm sure my Japanese colleague can comment on that. The preference rate of Alzheimer's is much lower in the Japanese population, though it's been by, actually I have not put in the sushi diet, actually I may use a term, that also is quite akin to the Mediterranean diet, except there was an increased emphasis on the fish products. So when we talk about the Mediterranean diet, what I do feel in the Western world, I think I want to set this in the context of the Western world, but there may be another scenarios, and I had to ask my colleague to comment about the sushi, that it might be used the term. There's a food pyramid for the Mediterranean diet. You will notice that they emphasize a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, the Mediterranean diet does not count carbohydrates, does not count calories. The second is that there is a de-emphasis on the meat product, but it does not advocate for the vegetarian diet. It does not advocate for total abstinence from meat products. So that's why they're at the top of the pyramid. What they emphasize is that at the bottom of the pyramid, there's a heavy emphasis on the vegetables and fruits. And later on, I will explain to you why those fruits and vegetables, most of them, they do hit the epigenetic mechanisms, and has been qualified as one of the essential components of the epigenetic diet interventions. As I want to summarize that, so those are not my work. I just want to summarize what has been published in literature. So I want to mention about to mention about a couple of things. There have been a lot of misnomers or controversy about fat. When you talk about fat, we now know that trans fat is outlawed, but also that in the Mediterranean diet there's a heavy emphasis on the virgin oil, which is a major ingredient of Mediterranean diet. So it is not so much about what kind of food you prepare, but how you prepare the food make a difference. And the second is that the robust finding is that the urinary polyphenols correlate with the cognitive function in terms of verbal memory, and so that is what is polyphenol-enriched food, especially in a selected population, individual with a high cardiovascular risk factor, family history, hypertension, past history of myocardial ischemia. They may especially benefit from this Mediterranean diet. And I think that it is not a kind of dogmatic approach, because some of these studies, they do survey and ask individuals how much do they adhere to the Mediterranean diet. The long and short is that the higher compliance with the Mediterranean diet, the lower the risk, the cardiovascular. risk factors and also the better the cognitive function. I think. I think, in other words, that this Mediterranean diet does not make any exaggerated claim about the benefits, rather that you want to emphasize the fact that there's still another unknown. And I think they summarize a couple of key studies done on the free sites. I won't go into the detail. Again, they emphasize what I said previously, that a better adherence to the Mediterranean diet. And also recently, there also is another couple of studies looking at the DASH diet. The DASH diet primarily is a focus on the systolic blood pressure. In other words, it lowers the blood pressure. In other words, it releases some of the stress on the endothelium cells. It provides a better cognitive function. Okay, so where are we at about the Mediterranean diet? As I mentioned, that we say that promise, challenge, and also that future opportunities. That nobody is in such an authoritative position as to say Mediterranean diet is a final answer to this Alzheimer's, dementia, or cognitive agent. But rather that I want to highlight a couple of maybe caveats for the audience to consider. There have been a lot of interest in the polyunsaturated fatty acids. Actually, in Japan, I want to mention that because I think fish is a high commodity, and actually, when I first came to America, I was quite surprised that my college friends, and actually when they talk about fish, and actually they usually associate with Friday, they would raise their eyebrows, and then they would even skip meals. So I think that is quite interesting as compared to the divergence of the cultural attitude towards fish and also the seafood product, whereas in Asia it is the opposite. And so when we mention about the fruits and vegetables, actually they have been shown that fruits and vegetables actually they provide a protective effect against mind cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's dementia. And it is a very controversial area. I want to throw in a couple of my clinical experience. I also work in the addiction field. When we talk about alcohol, the red wine, that I remember that if we work in the emerge, individual come in with a repeated hospitalization with alcohol dependence. And then when you look at the red wine, why on earth would it is something different? Maybe the European, they look at the alcohol there. But actually, that should be, it should be considered in the light of, first of all, the culture, and secondly, that there does is a dose-response curve behind the red wine. It is not the alcohol, but it is one of the polyphenols underlying the red wine that is protective. So actually, when you do pharmacology, they talk about the dose-dependent or therapeutic window. When you exceed the therapeutic window, then you are going to downhill slope. So that part, I feel that in most of the literature on Mediterranean, that the area has not been as emphasized. So especially they raise quite a lot of eyebrows from clinicians who work in the addiction field. And last, if you come across your colleague mentioned that if you eat too much and you're going to go nuts, too much nuts actually is the opposite. The walnut actually provides a protection. Okay, so for the next couple of minutes, it might be diverse to look at the molecular mechanism without going into too much about the molecular biology, because I know that they will be boring to some, and also they will consider a kind of quite arrogant on my part about trying to talk about something that the individual who doesn't come from the same background. But I want to emphasize that all of you are familiar with the fact that we have a completed genome. Most people are quite optimistic that maybe the end of now we had unraveled the mechanism behind most of the disease. However, that for the last decade, we find that it's just the beginning and not the end, because we are still there within the DNA structure, that and there are a lot of processes which is beyond the DNA structure primary sequence. And we summarize it talking about the phenotype. The phenotype without any genotype. In other words, the individual may be identical in terms of the DNA, but in terms of the DNA's sequence, the genes, how are they turned on and turned off, may make a lot of difference in terms of the cognition and also the behavioral repertoire. I want to mention about that this, I think the best I can to make it simple. There's the DNA with the double helix, so there is a histone with a protein will wrap around the DNA, and it is subject to a modification by this methylation. So when you add the methyl group or the methyl group, then also the same can explain to the other functional groups. But I won't bother you with the organic chemistry part. But there's also another layer of regulation we call the histone modulation. And essentially the histone modulation is a way we can turn genes on and off, and also we can remodulate the chromatin. And then the last, but not the least, is the way the RNA, the messenger RNA that demodulates some of the neurobiological process. That how would this components of the molecular process translated into neuroscience as well as new behavior, cognitive aging? As I want to mention about that, it is simply the switch on and off. There are multi-layers of process, and actually it is one step beyond what we know about receptor binding, signal transduction, and so in other words, we believe that is the underlying process. And also that when you talk about Alzheimer's dementia, that even though that we have a look at the genetic variants, 80% or 90% of the Alzheimer's are sporadic. In other words, there's no family history. When you go into the genotype, there's no change in the age, amino processing, and also some of the genes. So that's why that this process to look at the environment to come into the picture. I want to skip. There's another way to look at, say, somebody like some of the diagram, some of the molecular, the moiety that they add on, and also the way the histone is wrapped around the DNA. That maybe there is a secret behind epigenetic code. And if there's one thing I want, the diet can relieve some of the stress. And the second is that it can filter downwards, so it affect the cell loss as well as affect the amino PEG and even the tau hyperphosphorylation. Okay, I want to mention about that. This emphasizes that there's a multi-layer of the complexity. That when you filter down, say, from these clusters of families or neurotropic factors, when you filter it down to the neurons, you can imagine that in aging, the individual is highly vulnerable to, say, hypoxia, insult, metabolic stress. As a result, any of this neurotrophic influence can be highly compromised, and it can filter down into the synapse and causing synaptic failure, and ultimately behavior aberrations. And there has been a lot of interest to see whether we can activate some of the neural stem cells in the key areas like the neuroprogenitor cells in the hippocampus and also subventricular area. So with the recent advances in the induced potent stem cells, it seems that we are closer. And it is, as I say, it is a summary of the diagram. But I want to mention about that if we are talking about the basis behind why the dietary supplement as well as enriched environment work, because there have been evidence it can stimulate the new stem cell, and then we enter into the cell cycle to replace some of the cells that have been lost or damaged or under the severe metabolic stress to become non-functional. And also they can also counteract some of the glial cell inflammatory process. Okay. And the hippocampus is one most vulnerable area, but also the counterbalance is also the area quite active in the neurogenesis, in the cognitive aging. Okay, so I think that this term, the epigenetic diet, it is not my own proprietary invention. The individuals, there are people who work in cancer field. They first coined the term the epigenetic base or epigenomic base dietary. And the criteria behind it is that the bioactive ingredient, whether it may be extracted from plant, fish, that they have to act specifically upon any of the three components, i.e. that chromatin modulation is switched open from the closed conformation to the open, relaxed, so that gene transcription can proceed unhindered. It can also activate through the chromatin remodeling, as well as through the microRNAs by synthesis, and also the histone deacetylase inhibitor. So that's what this, so in other words, there's a dynamic equilibrium between the two enzyme systems. One is to add an acetyl group, the other is to delete an acetyl group. So we call it histones the dynamic equilibrium. And this is by no means exhaustive or exhausting. So I hope that you don't find going through this exhausting, but maybe highly energized. And you will notice that it comes from a different variety, and you can always pick some that is indigenous to your home country. But people in India, that the curcumin, it will be quite familiar, and in California, that it will be the grapes, and also the China, it will be the pellet ginseng. And also that the same come from any of the garden variety vegetables, like the green tea, and also that some of the garden variety, we put it on a salad, like the tomatoes, including, and also the vegetables, including broccoli. There's also another quite interesting kind of fruit, and also that stimulate my interest about the earlier this studies by Professor, excuse me my mispronunciation, I talk about homocysteine. There have been two sulfur-containing fruit vegetables. So I'm sure that some of you don't like garlic and don't like onions, but they are very powerful bioactive because they contain sulfur as one of the ingredients. And sulfur does have an effect to lower the homocysteine level. So there offers maybe there was another added benefit of the cysteine diet. And this certainly there are 7 families. So I want to mention about this another added on to the histone deacetylase inhibitor. So I won't go into the detail, but it's a very hot area in terms of to look at what are the molecular targets. And there have been a number of the synthesis analogs. And I think that they act directly upon the mitochondria, which is energy producing the factory within the cell, and also that is been implicated in the Alzheimer's dementia. So now, for instance, that ginseng acts on serotonin as well as cyclic AMP signal pathways and sembrin, which I will touch on later. And again, that is again a summary of the different pathways. So one is the DNA methylation, there is a microRNA. So they all converge into this DNA pathogenesis. And this methadone, it is where this one carbon metabolism which has an direct effect to modulate the homocysteine level. Okay, there is one carbon metabolism. Earlier there's a lot of interest to look at the vitamin B12, the vitamin B12 and folate to reverse some of the cognitive benefits. So I think that those studies are still on, and I think that there seems to be a very promising pathway targeting the homocysteine as a risk factor or even the culprit behind the Alzheimer's dementia. For the next couple of hours, I just want to introduce, without going into the details of the studies. And the reason why I mentioned about ginseng is that the ginseng is quite popular in China, and there have been a lot of interest about whether ginseng can offer any hope in treating or preventing Alzheimer's dementia. And there are different varieties of ginseng. And the thing I want to mention about that, to be consistent with this stress hypothesis, ginseng belongs to this chemical moiety called neurosteroids. And then there are different dietary supplements that fall under the neurosteroid dihydroepiandrosterone, and it is a new class of family. For the last 2 decades, it has been implicated in a wide variety of neurological disorder, ranging from Alzheimer's, dementia, schizophrenia, and there are key pathways which regulate the synthesis of the neurosteroids in the brain, and not just in the peripheral endocrine organs. So what ginseng, when you talk about the ginseng, there's not so much about the ginseng is unique, but I want to mention about when we talk about the design, any intervention, pharmacological interventions. I think that if you look at a pharmaceutical company for the last 2 decades, there have been at least close to 2 or 3 dozen drugs which fail in the phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials. When you wonder what is going on, because when you look at the number of drugs we prescribe for Alzheimer's dementia, actually there are very few, there are only 4 that are on the market. Because we know that Alzheimer's dementia is more than an amyloid disorder. It is that multiple organs, multiple layers of dysfunction, dysregulations, and aberration. Even among the amyloid, it is not, we know that there's also the neuroprotective factors of the non-neurotoxic amyloid, but also the clearance of the amyloid. So in other words, it can be affected at the clearance of the amyloid, that you can facilitate the clearance of the amyloid and offer therapeutic hope. But there has also been an interest that it is not just the amyloid, but also that it is also the phosphorylation of the tau that really is a culprit. And phosphorylation of the tau is a microtubule protein. And in Alzheimer's dementia, behavior-wise, it is not simply a memory disorder. I want to emphasize that, because it is a disorder that has a severe behavior disturbance, ranging from psychosis to a mood disorder. So some of the recent idea behind it is that 50% of moderate to advanced Alzheimer's dementia, they have psychotic features. Unfortunately, the current available antipsychotic medications, they all carry the black box warning. In other words, it can increase cerebrovascular disorder. So even though they are approved, but actually the side effects are not that favorable. So we are looking at very complicated or complex neuropsychiatric disorder that go beyond the memory disorder. Okay, what has been done about the ginseng ginseng extract? Without going into the details of the studies, I want to mention that there have been a couple of studies done in Korea. I don't know whether there's any investigator from Korea. The first study we showed that ginseng, Korean ginseng, carried through the 24 weeks can have a beneficial effect on the cognition in the Alzheimer's dementia. The first randomized controlled trial of ginseng, Korean ginseng in Alzheimer's dementia. And there's also another study that carried over into 2 years study. And in our group, we have looking at this in the schizophrenic population. There are overlapping features behind schizophrenia as well as Alzheimer's dementia. They are able to demonstrate that ginseng exerts a beneficial effect on the depression in our cohort of schizophrenia patients. Okay, so I haven't talked about ginseng. I want to switch over to another diet. I think they may be very familiar to some of you that may come from their home country, India, and then also in Southeast Asia, there is a curcumin. And also in India, they have been estimated the prevalence of Alzheimer's is much lower than in the Western world. So it lends some credence to the effect of curcumin in Alzheimer's subjects. However, that when we carry it to the clinical arena, randomized control trial, however, the results are not that promising. And even though there have been signals, there have been ongoing the clinical trial to reformulate curcumin so that to increase the bioavailability and hence it may exert a beneficial effect. So we have not thrown away the curcumin. And how does curcumin fit into the epigenetic scheme? Curcumin functions as a histone deacetylase inhibitor. Actually, it is also a sertraline type 3 in the same category as grapes. And it is one of the studies showing that curcumin does reduce beta amyloid and that is related to the decrease in oxidative stress. So there's the whole all scenarios of oxidative stress have become full cycle. In our studies within my research group, we have also done studies in the schizophrenia population, in the psychosis, and we are able to demonstrate that this specific dietary formulation exerts a beneficial effect in reducing some of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia. Okay, I want to switch gear into looking at another class of the dietary supplements or supplements and actually drinks, and with a specific focus into the vasculature components of Alzheimer's dementia. Alzheimer's dementia is not in the same category as vascular dementia. However, that there is a new phenomenon called neurovascular coupling, i.e., that is neuronal activity is highly dependent upon the vascular supply. That seems to be quite self-evident, but it is only recently with a sophisticated bold signal with this functional MRI, we have been able to demonstrate in Alzheimer's dementia there's a disconnect between the vascular supply and the regulation versus neuronal activity in the clinical subjects. And some of you maybe a coffee drinker, cocoa may enjoy the chocolate. There have been a lot of interest, especially coming from Europe, to look at the effect of cocoa and its effect on the vasculature. And some of the studies are highly promising in terms of it repairs the white matter integrity, and also that it recouple. This it corrects some of the uncoupling effect of neurovascular mechanism at the synaptic and also in the crucial brain areas like the hippocampus and also prefrontal cortex. So there's a summary of the cocoa effect. There is a meta-analysis from all the investigators. The non-short story is that when you look at the effect size, it seems that there's an overall beneficial effect of the cocoa. In other words, the cocoa that you can have cocoa by having chocolate drink as well as coffee. Okay. And the question is that whether the effect of cocoa is primary or secondary to the cardiovascular biomarkers. I think there is a summary of the meta-analysis. Anything to the left, to the left, it means that it is lower the cardiovascular. Anything to the right, there's only one odd study which showed that it produces the opposite effect. So they show that there may be a dose with one curve, a bell-shaped dose with one curve, governing the effect of cocoa on the cardiovascular health as well as the brain health. So, the question is, some of the people who work in the dietary, for 15 years ago, they almost said when you talk about chocolate as a health food, it's almost like you're preaching a heresy, and then you should be banned from the scientific world and also the clinical profession altogether. And actually, there are people looking at the dark cocoa. And actually, the dark cocoa is not actually considered as a promote obesity, but actually is the other way around. Is considered to be an anti-obesity as a functional food. I find it is a very interesting slide, and I'm not here to promote to try to poke fun at any of the countries, but I find it to be very fascinating. And it brings out a couple of stories. One is about statistics. Because this slide is published in first-class journal, and so that in countries where there's a high consumption of chocolate, there's also a high preference of Nobel Prize laureate. But in countries where there's a low consumption of chocolate, there's also a lower. So I think that I just want maybe I have talked. Do you see any flaw behind this slide? So that's apart from, they are quite fascinating whenever I bring this up, that I find that some of the audience, they're quite skeptical of this kind of trying to promote a kind of chocolate. So the other way, the message is that if you want to win a Nobel Prize, then you better start today going into the shop buying chocolate. So instead of coming, actually it would be much more beneficial to listen to what Dr. Chiu or the rest of the group had to say. Well, actually, you have to consider the other confounding factors. And I think that actually this study aroused a lot of controversy, even though it is in the first-rate journal. Okay, so I think that let's move on to the other areas that cause caffeine. For a long time, they look at another facet. They look at the conductivity, which is considered to be deficient in Alzheimer's dementia, and acute caffeine. It boosts up the effect of the caffeine. I'm by no means connected with this famous TV personnel, but I find it quite interesting with the message to carry forward. Is that he's right on when they try to promote green coffee, because one of the active ingredients in green coffee, chlorogenic acid, is an epigenetic target. It acts on the histone deacetylase inhibitor. So then also they produce an EDG activating effect. So, but whether the effect, the treatment effect have been magnified, leave it up to your own individual judgment. Okay, to make the long story short, this study that showed a neuroprotective effect of caffeine. But recently, there have been a caution from my cardiologist colleague that we have to consider about the cardiac arrhythmias effect. So there is, again, a dose-dependent, a bell-shaped relationship about the caffeine. So anything above 4 cups of caffeine, they would not consider to be beneficial. Actually, they become counterproductive. And also, I don't have the time to talk about green tea, but also the same the green tea is slightly different. There is a different moiety, but again, the active ingredient also act catechin, also act through the epigenetic signature. So again, that is what I'm referring to about this bell-shaped curve. So that is, I do feel that is a very reasonable way to look at the caffeine consumption. Is that there is a bell-shaped higher, then you will have a counter cardiovascular effect instead of the neuroprotective and also the cardioprotective effect. Okay, So there is again another study showing that green tea having a cognitive effect, so in terms of the functional MRIs modality. Okay. And I think I want to make this, as I say in the beginning, a kind of global perspective. We are not just focusing on North America, Mediterranean, Europe, and also Asia, but also looking at another continent, Africa. I have the opportunity to work with a South African colleague and to embark upon a study. I want to show you about this study. Okay, so I don't know whether anyone has worked on the safari, has opportunity to go on the safari and to be familiar with the origin behind the Bushman. So actually, again, it is again another credit that for a long time they have been able to look at these classes of missembrane, which is for this the South African plant. And then for the last 20 years, thanks to the pioneer, Dr. Nigel Carrick, you were able to extract some of the active ingredient, and finally we are able to bring it to the randomized control trial. It acts on a specific target, they call it the cyclic AMP signaling pathway, which is connected to the certainty, which is one of the histone deacetylase inhibitor, the class 3. And the result, without going into the detail, it is a normal subject. We're able to demonstrate that it exerts executive functions enhancement in the normal subjects. And we plan to move it, if the opportunity is funding arise, to move it into Alzheimer's dementia field. So again, it is summarized about this signal pathway, where does it fit into this cyclic AMP and also the histone. And it go along. I want to say something about this. There have been a very interesting paper that is primarily in experimental animal. When they restrict the caloric, then they activate some of the serotonin. So the take-home message is that reducing the carbohydrate load, you can actually enhance some of the cognitive process in aging. Okay, there is again some of the mechanism we believe how this sampling works. It acts with the cyclic AMP, and in turn it interact with this binding protein. As a result, it modulates some of the gene expression, and downhill that it enhances synaptic function. Again, this summary reiterates my message that this certainly actually is a conductor of a variety of biological process, whether functioning or non-functional in the aging. And they thought that this epigenetic shift in aging actually that can be modulated by the nutrients, whether they're high or no nutrients, so they strike a balance in the certainty. So I have summarized some of the effects of the certainty in terms of the optimize the aging, but because of the time, I will move on to again to summarize this again the grapes, and I think grapes exerts a similar effect on the cardiovascular effect. And it is also the first the clinical trials on grape juice and supplementation in the healthy elderly subjects, so it does show the positive effect. Okay, the last part, I hope that you are still awake. So I hope that I don't bore you too much with this epigenetics, is that to look at exercise and e-games. So I think I want to drive home the message. It is not just a dietary supplement or the pharmacological agents. It is to look at a holistic lifestyle. That's what this new field called integrative medicine is about. And okay, in North America, people engage in different kind of sport, and also in the East as well, although the games are different, but then the underlying physiology is similar. So otherwise, the couple and also the basic the cardiovascular effects are similar, that it enhances cardiovascular function, preload and afterload. And I think that more recently, it also has been becoming more established that some of the exercise it seems to be the conduit for the heart to talk to the brain, In other words, there is a quantified EEG changes. And so, on the other hand, that any kind of exercise, especially aerobic exercise, regular exercise, and also in the elderly, we have to modify in terms of the vigors, in terms of the aerobics, so in terms of the Tai Chi, and as an exercise, those are quite an important consideration in designing any program. When you talk about physical fitness, I want to summarize that those are the major elements behind the physical fitness. The thing I want to mention about it is not like when you see it in the popular magazines to show how impressive the bicep is. I think the key part is the cardiovascular fitness in terms of the myocardial oxygen consumption, resting heart rate, MET, as well as psychomotor speed. I think that is what it is, what the physical fitness is about. I think that it is. I think this part has been maybe relatively de-emphasized. This is by no means a political message. I want to emphasize, but I find that it's summarized quite well because the physical fitness is the key to a healthy body. So again, I did a healthy mind spirit as one and the same place. So because there have been a lot of study looking at the cardiovascular fitness and also the brain function. And I think that those studies are quite difficult to investigate, but nonetheless, it does show there is a consistent findings. There's the more physical fit, the more acuity in terms of the brain function, whether it will be immediate memory problem solving, as well as executive function in terms of the judgment. And also that it does affect the brain volume. And precisely at the same areas as the parietal region where the culprit for the Alzheimer's dementia is about. So we have been able to demonstrate, this group of investigators demonstrated for the first time that there's the relationship between the cardiovascular fitness and brain volume. And also there's the same results obtained with functional MRI. So. With regard to the e-games, the results are not that robust relatively because I think the difficulty is difficult to standardize morphological issues, but I want to because there have been different brain games, brain activities, and then also that I just want to mention about some of the training and control that may have an effect as well on the brain function. And it is one of the studies that correlate with EEG changes in the different areas, and also that is one of the ways to try to synchronize ambulation with the video technology. So I think that is. So I think to summarize that what we do know about exercise, there have been more increasing studies that regular exercise that come from this European study, that it does have, in fact, it delayed the onset of the severe cognitive decline in the elderly. And they have been replicated across different nations. And so with the videos, I don't want to make any conclusive remark because the jury is still out whether the video games by themselves, independent of any dietary supplement, will have any beneficial effect on delaying or modifying the cause of Alzheimer's dementia. So to summarize that, I want to summarize that this study, all the studies that I'm talking about are the epigenetics. There's a kind of the major category called the flavonoids, and we'll look at that it can activate the neuroprotective branch as well as, on the other hand, it inhibits some of the detrimental process, and as a result that it can filter down to slow down the neurodegeneration. On the one hand, it can preserve some of the memory function. And so the last time that this kind of consensus workshop done by the NIH concluded that there is insufficient evidence to recommend any specific preventive strategies. However, there are methodological involved, and the jury is not out whether unless we do a randomized control trial of 5 years duration to look at whether epigenetic diet really delay the onset or to modify the cause, but it will be quite, I hope that we can stimulate multi-site investigators to be interested in this very interesting topic. Again, that it is to reiterate some of the components of epigenomics diet. It is not a fancy diet, it is not like an Atkins diet, but there are strong biological basis behind it in terms right at the molecular level. And I want to make a last speech. Maybe the answer is when you combine this night buffet lunch, when you combine the different components to make it a multi-domain paradigm, maybe that is the secret to prevent the cognitive decline and also to prevent the Alzheimer's dementia. And as the last speech I want to make a pitch is that we're talking about the dietary supplement. There have been another paradigm movement to transform the dietary supplement into drugs. In other words, they fulfill the FDA phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and also there are similar jurisdictions in other jurisdictions. But in order to do that, there are a number of methodological issues. Some of them can be easily overcome. Some of them that it related to the fiscal constraint and also the regulatory standards. But some of them have been. I just want to show you one of the projects I've been involved in is we have been able to connect the liposome to curcumin and make it a drug. That is spearheaded by Dr. Helson, currently undergoing clinical trial in brain tumor and possibly in Parkinson's disease. So I just want to, and also that the same can be the case for the others popular like omega-3 fatty acid and also the algae-free ginsenoside. So in other words, these supplements are a resource to look at active drug moieties. So again, that maybe the vision is that we hope that in a decade we can translate all these advances into personalized medicine, and that this diet is a bridge between cognitive aging as well as preventive medicine. Without much ado, I just want to thank the audience for staying with me at this to look at this important topic. So open to any discussions.